The biggest thing is that we want to have every option to avoid the fight first, right? Like as defenders, my main goal is to avoid like any fight or altercation that could break out, because I win 100% of fights that I don't get started in, right? If I'm never in the fight, there's a no risk factor for me. I'm not risking anything. But beyond that, like I want to have tools like pepper spray. I want to have some hand-to-hand skills so that I can keep people at distance or go to those other skills if I have to, rather than just going for the gun when it may not be tactically a good idea, but legally it may be a really bad idea. If there's not a legal threat, but I have no other training or no other skill set, and I end up going to the gun, then I may defend myself, but then I may be in a huge legal problem situation because I've taken it on myself to make the problem a lethal threat when really it wasn't from the beginning. I think that that's something in the concealed carry world that people get very wrong, in thinking that, well, I have a gun and the gun is the best tool for self-defense, so I'm good. Like, I don't need to practice with it. I don't need to carry any other tools. I don't need to pay attention to my surroundings. I don't need to carry medical gear because I've got this gun and it will solve all my problems. When in reality, the likelihood that you're going to need something like pepper spray or a trauma kit or hand-to-hand skills are way more likely than you needing your firearm. And a lot of times when we talk to people, they go to tools first, right? They want to know, like, the number one question that I get is like, what gun should I buy, right? And it's like, well, what do you need it for first? Let's talk about the situations. Let's talk about, if you need to protect yourself. But they want to know, like, what do I need to have? What do I need to carry it in? And I'm good to go. And that's really not the answer. I think the skills need to come first. And then the tools are based around what skill set I have and what situation I might be in. And the mindset is overall. I have to be paying attention. I have to legally know what I can and can't do, and morally what I should and shouldn't do, and when I can avoid situations and when I can't.
Well said. Well said. Thank you for saying it out loud. And that is something that I will shout from the rooftops until the last episode of this show.
If you're new or watching this as a replay, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. Please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and consider, if you're able, to become a paid subscriber on defenders-live.com. Your support is the only way I'm able to continue doing this labor of love. And also, if you're looking for exceptional firearms and self-defense training, go to defenders-usa.com and look at the calendar to see what's coming to your area this year.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Defenders Live. I am your host, Laura Thorson. Tonight, we have my good friend, Will Workman on from Workman Protection. Will is a former probation officer and current firearms instructor. He's also a competitive shooter, YouTuber, Second Amendment YouTube coach, or you call him 2A YouTube coach, photographer, husband, and father. He wears many hats. Will got started as a student in the world of concealed carry after getting married and realizing that he had a responsibility to protect his home and family. After having kids and working in social work and law enforcement, Will began to understand on a deeper level the importance of gaining skills with a handgun, medical gear, and other self-defense tools to preserve life. Will's passion is providing others with the skills, tools, and mindset to protect themselves and their families, and he provides helpful information on his YouTube channel. So check it out, guys, called Workman Protection. Let's welcome Will on to the show. Hey, Will.
Guys. Hey, how's it going?
Great. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we have known each other for quite a while, and it's so funny. I think I'm at the end of year 2, and I still haven't had Will Workman on. What's up with that?
I don't know. I just wasn't good enough until now, I guess.
No, Will, one of the things I love about you the most is that you have one of the biggest hearts of service I think I've ever met. You're a person that is not only interested in helping others, but like adding massive value to other people. I am a part of your YouTube mastermind that you help put together, and every single one that you do, I learn something new. So I guess that might be a good place to start. You are a YouTuber. Like, I don't think of myself as a YouTuber.
Yeah.
I almost think like sometimes that has a negative connotation.
I know. You sound like a middle schooler when you say it.
Yeah, that could be. But I have learned a lot. And so what gave you the idea to form a mastermind and how did that all come to be?
Yeah. So really, it started with the channel. When I started the channel, I really wanted to just answer simple questions for people. I started having people in my church ask questions about what kind of gun to buy, what kind of holster to buy. I was answering the same questions over, and I was like, why don't I just start a YouTube channel and start making, good quality videos that I can just send people instead of just, it being in passing at church, me trying to explain holster safety rules. So
Right.
that's why I started the channel. And as I got started, I knew like absolutely nothing. I was able to really learn and grow from other niches and other channels that I got to know and saw what they were doing well. And I really saw a gap in the instructor and firearms YouTube world where people wanted to make videos, but they really didn't know how to make money with it. They didn't know how to connect with an audience. They didn't know how often to post. They didn't know how to make thumbnails, right? A lot of people in our world are 50, 60-year-old dudes that are setting up their iPhone at the range and they're trying to make the best of it. I'm not knocking them, but there's a lot of people like me when I started that I really didn't know what I was doing. So as I kind of got my feet under me with YouTube, I was like, why don't I just offer this and just open it to gun people, because we kind of understand the world of navigating YouTube and what we can and can't show and say. We have a lot in common. So I really just wanted to provide that service for other people like me. And it's been like really encouraging for me too. I feel like I've learned more from you guys than you've learned from me.
I don't know about that, but I mean, we're all learning together, and I think that's the point of everything. That's the point of my show too, which I think is really interesting because we're all on a journey in different things. I think the more that we just share with each other about our experiences and what's worked and what's not, like, I think that's helpful. And the people that are out there really wanting to learn and grow in whatever area that is, are going to be drawn to those kinds of things.
Right.
But, I haven't had a lot of trouble with this, but maybe you have. I'm curious about like the rules with YouTube about guns and how does that affect you as an instructor posting videos on YouTube? And what are some of those like rules?
It honestly, there's a lot that is, it's easy. I will say it's easier for us to navigate as like instructors, especially like my channel. I've pretty much only done pistol stuff. I may like eventually do some shotgun or rifle stuff with talking about home defense, but that's about it. Like anything that shooting oriented for me is concealed carry related. So it's always going to be pistol stuff. Whereas a YouTuber who is just like a strictly gun channel, whether they're doing like reviews of specific guns or upgrading ARs, or they're doing a more entertainment style video where they're shooting pumpkins or watermelons or whatever, they're going to have a much harder time because they have so much more of a variety of weapons. Whereas I don't necessarily have that. But YouTube in July did really like change a lot of rules on the back end. I haven't had anything like flagged or taken down. I've had a couple things like age restricted, which was really interesting, but I haven't had any big issues with YouTube. But I'm also like very careful of knowing what I'm able to show on YouTube and what I'm not. A lot of the changes that came in July were things you can't show yourself putting on a silencer or taking a silencer off of a gun, which makes no sense because if you have the tax stamp, it's legal. And then they also like really cracked down on reloading, that you like can't show reloading at all on the channel.
Really? I didn't know that.
Which is nuts because again, completely legal, like no problem with that. So for my channel, like that doesn't really affect me, but there are YouTube channels that are dedicated to showing people how to reload.
Right.
And so, there's certain niches like that it's really been hard for.
Wait.
And
when you say reloading, do you mean the process of making your own ammunition or do you mean reloading a gun?
Yeah, so not like necessarily like reloading a magazine, but reloading ammunition. I should have been more specific. Sorry.
Okay, that's interesting. That's really interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of like nuances with ARs that any type of, because ARs are a hot topic, right? Anything that's like customizing the inside of an AR. If you're adding like a flashlight or something like that, you're probably fine doing red dots and stuff like that. But as far as like switching out stocks or even like adding a foregrip or doing a trigger job or anything like that, that's like modifying a gun, you really are not supposed to do on YouTube. There's kind of the rules, and then it's like, what are they going to call you on? But with their AI and being able to review videos so efficiently, I wouldn't call them on their bluff.
Are there certain like words you're not even allowed to use? Because like
not really. Like there's nothing in the new policies, at least you're not allowed to say this, but there's also, it's completely
that could change anytime.
Yeah. I had some notes on their policy that was just hilarious the way they
I mean, honestly, the fact
understand it.
that they're even doing that, it makes me
I know.
so angry, you know?
Yeah.
The principle of it alone is
Yeah.
another
So
conversation.
yeah, I know. They word also in their like after each section of the big changes, they word it to basically say this is not like all the rules. It's subject
Yeah,
to
not
change at any
limited to
time.
this.
Like it's
Right,
exactly.
right.
And so it's like, okay, so you can just decide at any point that, well, we just don't really like this. The other really big change that came, I think, for everybody in the firearms world of YouTube is that you can no longer have a link, even in the description, or a link talked about in your video to a website that sells firearms. Now, you know
Oh,
as well as I do, like if somebody's selling firearms online, they have to be an FFL dealer and they have to ship to an FFL dealer. And then you still have to have a background check to pick the gun up. So again, completely legal.
yeah,
But that does mean that big companies that sell guns, like I know YouTube channels that their business is they're a gun shop.
right,
Right. So all of their
right,
YouTube shorts and their YouTube videos are trying to encourage people to just come to their gun shop. And
right,
since their website sells guns, they can't put that in the description anymore, which is crazy. That also like really affects sponsorships, right? For people
right.
like you and I that want to
Yeah.
work with companies that sell guns, we're not able to actually put those websites in the description now, which Hickok 45 did some really good content on that, kind of coming out and clarifying a lot of it because
Mhm,
he's been on YouTube for probably 10, 12 years.
mhm.
And all of his sponsors have been like gun shops and gun manufacturers and ammo shops. It definitely makes it challenging.
Wow. You know, I don't suspect that any of the rules will get any more lax as time goes on. That's just
No.
my gut feeling,
Yeah.
and that's not a very good gut feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yep.
good information to know. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
there might be people, if they don't have a channel yet, might be thinking about starting one, or
Yeah.
maybe they're just a fan and maybe they've seen some of these changes being implemented and wondering what on earth is going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why are people not advertising these particular things anymore?
I know. And I hate it because again, it's not even anything that's controversial as far as like state law. Like I
Right.
could almost understand if it was something with like, AR pistol braces or
Mhm,
and some of that is in there. Don't get me wrong. Like they sneak some of that in too with what you can and can't show. But things
mhm,
like that are like different for each state. I could maybe understand. But like
mm.
putting powder into a cartridge,
Right,
like that's not illegal anywhere. So
right.
it just seems crazy to me to
Mm.
hammer down on those things that are completely
It's just
legal.
interesting. It's very interesting why that particular information would be censored.
Right.
Hmm.
Exactly.
Hmm. Okay, well, let's move on to another topic, shall we?
Sure.
So, you and I talked about this before the show, and I think this is a really important topic. You said that what you believe one of the big problems are in the training community is that qualifications for instructing are difficult to articulate, and that the beginner
Yeah.
student often looks to military, law enforcement, and the NRA as experts. So, tell everybody, what is your opinion about what is wrong with that?
Yeah. So you have to be careful when you start talking about this to not, and I don't want to bash anybody in any way. I
Yeah.
worked with a lot of awesome people that were in law enforcement. Some of my best friends are in the military. I know some military and law enforcement guys that are way more skilled than I am with a
Mhm,
handgun and know what they're doing. Adam Winch being one of them.
mhm.
But that is not the norm, unfortunately, when it comes to military and law enforcement, and especially with NRA instructors. It's just kind of become this blanket of like, if you have had any experience with a gun professionally, then you must be an expert, which when it comes to, let's kind of separate those out. So military, for instance, I know military guys that are incredible with a rifle, way better than I am with a rifle,
Mhm.
and have amazing training, whether or not they've had, combat experience or not. They have, just hours, thousands of hours with rifle training, but they know nothing about pistols.
Mhm.
Like they just don't have the experience because that's not what their mission calls for, right?
Right.
They a lot of times kind of have that claim to fame of being in the military and knowing what to do with a rifle, but that doesn't mean that they're even good with a pistol, let alone like know civilian law and self-defense law and things like that.
Right, different
Um,
missions. Yeah,
Exactly. And
yeah.
when it comes to law enforcement, it's kind of a different turn. So they know a lot of the legal stuff from a law enforcement perspective, which in a lot of ways can be more dangerous, right? Because they know what their department's policy is, but they may not necessarily know what your day in court is going to be like because they've never faced anything like that as a civilian, right?
Mhm.
And their mission is totally different. If they have, a threat with a firearm, their job is to chase them down and get them into custody. That's not our role as a civilian.
Right.
And I also know cops that are amazing people, that are amazing communicators, that are really good in so many different scenarios. And I'll just ask them like, hey, do you do much shooting? How much do you train? Do you want to go to the range sometime? And they're like, nah, the yearly qual is good enough for me. But these are the men and women that are guarding our public high schools and middle schools and that are working on the road. It's scary for them. It worries me for them that they're really not taking their firearms training seriously. But especially if they are teaching based on the fact that they are law enforcement for professionals, so they know how to teach you how to shoot a handgun, and they really don't understand the concealed carry world at all, and they're only working from an open carry rig too, which, as you know, is very
totally
different.
Yeah,
exactly. And then with NRA instructors, I think that I have a lot of respect for the NRA, and I think they started as a really, really good thing. And I actually think that it's great that most state governments recognize them as kind of an outside policy of, instead of taking this state issued class, right, that has all of the government required things that you have to meet in order to get a concealed carry permit, we're at least going to give an outside resource. The NRA or even USCCA is another popular one that a lot of states are opening up for the concealed carry permit. But the problem with that is that the NRA instructor, the basic instructor class, is also like just accuracy. Like everything about the NRA is just how accurately can you shoot, which is great. But what does that have to do with your draw time? Like how quickly you can get your gun out? What does that have to do with whether or not your holster is safe or not, or when you can and can't use OC spray? And so I think a lot of times we kind of take these specific areas and just give them a blanket of like, they're an expert because they know law enforcement or because they know accuracy first pistol shooting. It really puts a bad taste in people's mouth of firearms instructors, because a lot of these guys really don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. And so, we talked before on the show about vetting your instructors, and that's so hard to do as a beginner, because you can go on their website and they can give you 5 pages of credentials with acronyms that you don't have a clue what they all mean.
Right.
And even if someone has a bunch of long resume, still doesn't mean they are a good teacher. That you know
exactly.
So like what I think, at least for me, that helped is like I went on and looked at videos of them teaching to see like what kind of a person are they? Are they somebody that I look like I could trust? Are they?
And that's
like
huge. That's huge.
Yeah.
Like, how do they communicate with people?
Right.
Especially like with military and law enforcement. Like I'm not knocking those guys, but if they're used to training other military and law enforcement guys, then like 65-year-old grandma is going to respond very differently than law enforcement military guys.
And not only that, one of my biggest prerequisites from learning from anyone is, are they learners themselves?
Yeah.
That's a huge thing for me, because I think that if a person is continually learning themselves, first of all, their ego is somewhat in check. I think there's a bit of humble pie with that. With just having the humility to say, I don't know everything and I always want to learn. That's going to translate in teaching someone. So for me, that's a huge one as well. Any other ones you can think of?
I just think that the communication part is huge, like just how they talk to people and how they manage different students, because like people are just so different. And like, again, like some people can, even if they know the material, right, even if they are an expert in these different fields, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're good teachers. Right. I know a lot of I know a lot of people that are an expert in their field that have no business teaching anyone, because they don't know, how the brain works. They don't know how people learn. Brian Hill is a great example of someone who is very much a teacher first and then an expert, because he's so good at teaching and communicating with people. And then his expertise is just on top of that. And so I think a lot of times people look for the expertise and they don't look for how well they teach people. They don't talk to people that have taken their classes. And so you really, as an instructor, have to kind of gauge, like every class that I teach is different depending on who's in it. Because I have, people that show up that really know what they're doing, and I kind of can use a fine-tooth comb and really help almost coach them through the process almost at a more intermediate level. And then I always tell people my favorite people to teach are like beginner old ladies. They are my favorite.
They're fun, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Because you get this young guy that comes up and he thinks he knows how to do everything, and he's just there to get the piece of paper so that he can get his permit, right? And so you're like trying to correct him, but he's not really being coachable. And then the older lady will come up to the table and she's like, okay, now how do I pick up the gun? Right? She wants like from scratch every example. And I love it. It's awesome.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm the same way.
Yeah.
Beginner students really have a special place in my heart because they're clean slates most of the time. And they're
Yeah.
so good at just coming up and being like, I don't know, teach
Yeah.
me,
Yep.
and it's fun.
Yeah. It
And
really is.
usually those are the types of people, and not saying always beginners, but the type of people that have that open mind,
Mhm.
that are humble and just want to learn, usually are the
Right.
ones that excel the fastest.
Yeah.
So, and
Exactly.
it's always fun, like
Exactly.
as a teacher, seeing that. So
Yeah.
I wanted to circle back on a couple things you said about, I can barely read my handwriting here. Okay. Okay. Because I try to keep paying attention to you while I'm writing.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm not looking at what I'm writing.
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting that you talked about, and I want to bring this up again because I think it's an important point, about
Mhm.
that law enforcement are taught to go after someone,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And their job is to go after them, to make contact with them, and to possibly arrest and detain them, right?
Right.
Our
Right.
job as concealed carriers is the opposite, which is to break contact. We
Right.
want to get that out of there,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
We
Exactly.
don't want to pursue anyone. This is why it's called self-defense and not self-offense. And that is
Right.
because we're being pursued and we want to break contact and we
Right.
don't even want any part of it. So
Right.
could you break that down a little bit more for people on why that's important to understand
Sure.
as a concealed carrier?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the biggest thing is that we want to have every option to avoid the fight first, right?
Mhm.
Like as defenders, my main goal is to avoid like any fight or altercation that could break out because I win 100% of fights that I don't get started in, right? If I'm
Right.
never in the fight, there's a no risk factor for me. I'm not
Right.
risking anything. But beyond that, like I want to have tools like pepper spray. I want to have some hand-to-hand skills so that I can keep people at distance or go to those other skills if I have to, rather than just going for the gun when it may not be tactically a good idea, but legally it may be a really bad idea. If there's not a
Right.
legal threat, but I have no other training or no other skill set, and I end
Mhm.
up going to the gun, then I may defend myself, but then I may be in a huge legal problem situation because I've taken it on myself to make the problem a lethal threat when really it wasn't from the beginning. I
Yeah.
think that that's something in the concealed carry world that people get very wrong in thinking that, well, I have a gun and the gun is the best tool for self-defense, so I'm good. Like I don't need to practice with it. I don't need to carry any other tools. I don't need to pay attention to my surroundings. I don't need to carry medical gear because I've got this gun and it will solve all my problems.
Mhm.
When in reality, the likelihood that you're going to need something like pepper spray or a trauma kit or hand-to-hand skills are way more likely than you needing your firearm. And a
Mhm.
lot of times when we talk to people, they go to tools first, right? They want to know, like the number one question that I get is like, what gun should I buy? Right. And it's
Mhm.
like, well, what do you need it for first? Let's talk about the situations. Let's talk about, if you need to protect yourself, but they want to know like, what do I need to have? What do I need to carry it in? And I'm good to go. And that's
Mhm.
really not the answer. I think the skills need to come first. And then
Mhm.
the tools are based around what skill set I have and what situation I might be in. And the mindset is overall, I
Right.
have to be paying attention. I have to legally know what I can and can't do, and morally what I should and shouldn't do, and when I can avoid situations and when I can't.
Well said. Well said. Thank you for saying it out loud. And
Sure.
that is something that I will shout from the rooftops until the last episode of
Yeah.
this show.
Hey guys, I would like to invite you to something new that I'm offering. I am going to be hosting a live Zoom call once a month for my paid subscribers. I really want to offer something special, something valuable, and something with a personal touch to you every month. And this is my way of helping you guys on your journey. And what you can expect is a variety of different topics, all within 4 buckets that I talk about on Defenders Live, which are health and well-being, mental and emotional health, spiritual fitness, and self-defense. So once a month, I am going to be presenting some questions to you during that Zoom call. We're going to have a conversation live, and there's a good chance that the founder of Defenders USA, Adam Winch, might be on that call as well. So I invite you to join me on the Defenders Live community. As a paid subscriber, you will be getting emails about these once a month. You can sign up for this by going to defenders-live.com and becoming a paid subscriber. I hope to be talking to you soon and seeing you in the live Zoom calls. Thank you so much for your support of Defenders Live.
You said that something about, people that are that only have a gun as a tool are thinking, I don't need those other tools. I think that that's partly true.
Yeah.
That they might just think this is good enough for me and
Right.
I'm covered. But I also think that it might be just a lack of awareness or consideration of what an actual encounter might look like.
Right.
And so I think one of the most important tools that I've learned over the years is what we call verbal judo. Could you explain what that tool is? Because most of the time, hopefully, if you're situationally aware in your environment, not always, you probably, maybe, hopefully won't be ambushed. And it'll just be somebody kind of walking up to you saying, hey, do you have $1? Or whatever the line is, they're trying to get connection with you and move in closer to you. And that's a more likely encounter, isn't it, in our day-to-day gas pumping or whatever's going on. So could you break that down for us a little bit and why that tool by itself could de-escalate the situation and get us, that might make it so we don't have to go to any other tools?
Sure. Yeah. So verbal judo started as a teaching curriculum turned book back in the 80s. And it's a very skilled law enforcement guy that wrote it. And it really, he came from the standpoint, I think he worked like as a counselor or something in the psychology field first, and then later in life decided to get into law enforcement. So he came to it from a very different perspective because he was a very good communicator. He was teaching and coaching people. And then when he got into law enforcement, he realized that like so many law enforcement officers were just barking at people and not getting the compliance that they wanted. They just were getting more and more frustrated, and what they were doing wasn't working. And so his teaching curriculum really took off in the law enforcement field. But it also, in recent years, I would say in the last decade, has really taken off in the firearms training and concealed carry teaching community. And that's because what you just said, like he talks about the tongue being the most powerful tool, right? Because almost all, and I'm not saying all, but the majority of the encounters that we may find ourselves in start with words, right? Whether they end there or not. So if that's the first tool that we can use, then why not learn to use it really, really well? And the reason he calls it verbal judo is because when you think about judo, it's very much using other people's movements, gravity, and using their own movements and momentum. That's the word I'm looking for. Using their momentum against them. And so that's kind of what you're doing with verbal judo, is you're communicating with people to try to get what he calls purposeful compliance. Because that's really what we want, right? We want people to do, when we're in a defensive encounter, we want people to do what we need them to do, whether that be back up, whether that be leave us alone, whether that be calm down. But as you know, when somebody is really heated or upset, just yelling calm down over and over at them doesn't usually work. It's really, that's something I teach, at a very basic level, even in my concealed carry classes, that the tongue is such a powerful tool that you can use to really get yourself out of trouble before ever having to use any weapons or any other skills that you have. That's just such a useful tool that we have with us. And it can be just as used in such a negative way as it can used in a positive way.
Right.
And so I did a class at the Active Self-Protection conference this year, and I'm kicking myself for not remembering the instructor's name. I know his last name was Ross. I cannot remember his first name. But anyway, it was a class specifically on criminal behavior. He was a probation officer for a few decades. And we did this training where he set up a screen with a tarp over it. We were kind of in this tent. And then he had a projector that was projecting onto this screen. And then he was standing behind us facing the projector. We had this live, basically, person that we were dealing with this self-defense encounter. And so he's behind us. We have another range officer directly behind us, making sure that we don't turn around or do anything unsafe. But we're using live ammo and inert pepper spray. And then we're using verbal judo. We're using our communication skills in this scenario. And it was exactly what you just said. Like every time it was guy at a gas station, he's walking up, go with it, right? See what you can do to either get out of the situation, decide if you need to use your pepper spray, decide if you need to use a gun. And I left that class like, I went to the gas station on the way back from Active Self-Protection, and I'm looking around and there's this guy at the front door who's like asking people for money. And I'm just sitting here thinking like, yesterday I went through this exact situation like 12 times.
Wow.
And so I felt so much more like comfortable, not necessarily with my gun, right? It wasn't a shooting class. Like it wasn't a marksmanship or a speed class, but I felt so much better about when and when not to use my pepper spray and just how to use my words to actually get the compliance that I need out of people.
Yeah, that's so cool. Or just use the other door and avoid them altogether, right?
Exactly. Or go to the next gas station, right?
Yeah. That's what
Even
I'm more
better.
likely to do, honestly.
Yeah. Yep. I've pulled up to gas stations many times. My wife is currently pregnant, and we were
Oh,
traveling back from a trip just a few weeks ago, and she is pregnant. So she had to pee really bad. It's like,
yeah.
midnight, and we stop at this
Oh.
gas station, and there's like 4 people out front. And I was just like, nope, we're not stopping. She was like, I have to go really bad. I was like, you're going to have to hold it because we're not putting ourselves in this situation. So she wasn't happy, but she was safe. So
Yeah. Well, good on you, though. I think that's awesome. I'm sure she forgave you later.
yeah,
That's so
maybe.
funny. Let's talk about this as it applies to church security teams,
Sure. Yeah.
because I know a lot of people in church security who kind of have that same mindset of, well, I have a gun and I'm
Right.
good. So
Yeah.
what can we talk to people about that, about not just preparing for the worst case scenario necessarily, which is an active shooter plan, right? And that's
Right.
what most churches prepare for. But what are the other tools and training that a church security team should be thinking about and actively training in order
Sure.
to cover everything else as well?
Yeah. 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 So, I mean, that's a great point that like churches really want to focus on active shooters, right? That's the main thing that they're like, we want training on this. A lot of times, if there's been an active shooter anywhere in the US that's gotten big media attention at a church, then that's when everybody wants to sign up for classes, right?
Mhm.
And then 6 months goes by, a year goes by, and no one cares anymore because they don't feel the problem just because they haven't heard about it in a while. But really, like the active shooter problem in a church is the most simple problem to solve. You
Yeah.
find him and you put him down. You kill him. You stop him. That's the most simple solution, right? Like, not to be graphic or anything, but if you have somebody who's in your church that's actively killing people, then you stop him, and that's it. Then that part is over. But the complexity comes into play when you start thinking about all the other more common things that happen in church. So I've had to use my trauma kit at church, and it wasn't a self-defense encounter. It wasn't an active shooter. It wasn't anything cool, right? It was an older guy who didn't have very good balance, and he fell and hit his head on a pew and had a nice big gash across his head. So this was like very beginning, like this has been years, almost a decade ago, when I first started like concealed carrying and getting into that world. But I had put together a trauma kit that I had in my car, and so I ran out and grabbed it, and we used a lot of gauze to stop the bleeding, and he ended up having to go get a bunch of stitches. But like, that's the type of stuff that happens in church, right? We've had instances in my church where we've had people that are under the influence that come up to the door asking for money, right? That's pretty common at church, especially if you're in an area where there's a lot of homeless people or there's a very poverty-stricken area. You're going to get that. You're going to get people who are not interested in actually coming into the church or hearing anything you have to say, but they know that churches sometimes give people money. So they're going to come to the door for that. A lot of churches just focus on the gun stuff, and they don't think about the medical stuff. They don't think about the communication stuff. They don't think about, for instance, child abuse, right? Sexual abuse in the nursery with children, which is huge. Like, when you look at statistics, way more of a problem in the church in America with sexual abuse in the church than literally anything else.
Wow.
Like, if you're going to focus on one thing in church security, focus on keeping your children safe, because this is huge. I mean, so you have to have those steps to be able to vet who is in your nursery and who is working with your youth and with your children's ministry. Having background checks in place are great, but the problem with background checks is they only are noticed after someone has been convicted of a crime, right? So they only help if they've been caught before, unfortunately. So that's something that you really need to have in place. And then just having rules like, no adult is going to be alone with a kid at any point. Like, we will have 2 adults in each class. If one kid needs to go to a bathroom or something and they need help, or somebody needs to take them, then you get another adult and you go in. There really needs to be that accountability in churches. And people don't think about that because it's not a big problem until it is. Right.
Yeah.
And those are the type of things that tear churches apart, that split churches, that ruin pastors' careers, whether or not the pastor was involved or knew about it or did everything correctly or not. When things like that happens, it hurts a community so deeply. So that's, something that's very, very common in churches. And then you have complicated situations with kids, like custody issues, right? Where, one parent has a protective order, a restraining order against another parent, and they're not allowed to be around them or to pick up the kids or anything like that. So you need to have some type of system to know who can and can't get kids, have a check-in and check-in out system that's not just let them roam free and go to their parents or whoever wants to pick them up, because that can be super dangerous.
Right.
So yeah, I think that the same things that are important for us as parents and for us as protectors and concealed carriers should be the same thing that we're doing in churches. And the main difference is we're dealing with other people's kids, and we're dealing with a bunch of other people's kids, right? So while it may be fine for me to be alone with my son or my daughter because they're my kids, right? It's very different with an adult that I don't know. That's just not appropriate, and it's not a good situation to be in. So there's a lot with children and with just dealing with people with communication in the same way we do as protectors in the concealed carry world that we really need to implement, and not just think, well, these guys are military or law enforcement or they shoot good, so they're perfect for the concealed carry part of the church or the church safety team. They really need to be people who can communicate with people well, especially when you talk about your greeters. Your greeters have to be friendly, right? I know a lot of military and law enforcement and just regular guys that are great guys, but they just don't come across as friendly, right? So when people are coming through the door, you have to be able to be friendly and also like spot threats and notice things that are not normal. Notice when people are under the influence and just know how to communicate with people.
Yeah. Really good information, Will. Really good. Yeah. That I'm going to think about that more. Those are some things that I hadn't thought about before. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's something that I'm really passionate about, because I think a lot of churches do that really poorly, that all they think about is the active shooter world, and they really need to think about these other more likely areas.
Yeah, that's really good. Awesome. Well, we have time for one more topic. So let's switch to, if you're willing, let's switch to training a little bit.
Sure.
So I think this is interesting. In your email that you sent me, you talked about draw to first shot training. So potentially, not always, but potentially that could be a problem in your training if that's all your training is draw to first shot. And it's super fun and exciting to go to a class. And it turns into this competition, and it's super fun to watch on YouTube, right? To see someone with a sub-second draw to first shot. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about why, if we focus on that too much, how that could be hurtful to our training.
Yeah. So my data for this is my own failures. So let's start there.
I love that.
I'm not knocking anybody who's, lightning fast with a draw to first shot. I think it's fun, right? It's a really fun metric to be able to measure. So the reason I say I base that on my own failure is because I started carrying a gun in 2015. Was when I really got my concealed carry permit, started carrying. At that point, I think I had at least consumed enough content from good instructors to know that I needed a Kydex holster. No, I take that back. That was probably a year in. My first gun was a snub-nosed Smith & Wesson revolver. By the time I got my Glock 19 the next year, I had done enough research to realize, okay, I actually need a safe holster. I don't just need a sock that I'm, sticking it in.
Yeah.
But when I got into it, I was like, all right, let's do this. Like, I want to be fast. I want to be accurate. I want to be really good. I did what most people do that haven't had good instructing. I went out and I set up a target at 3 yards, if that. I started just lightning speed as fast and hard as I could. How fast can I get this thing out of the holster and pull the trigger and come close to hitting the target, right? That's all I really cared about. And I realized after some work, I could do that pretty darn fast. And at that point, I wasn't using a timer. I was just, trying to go as fast as I could. And I had another guy in my church that got into it about the same time. And so, what do, ignorant people do when they don't know what they're doing? They do it together, right? So without a timer, we just started racing each other, and he was really fast. So then I had to be as fast as he was, right? So I did this for years and years, and I actually bought a timer later, and we started doing draw to first shots and got sub-second, and then we started getting, low 90s, and we were pretty proud of that. And then I would even get some 80s occasionally. And I'm talking like the way I described it, like 3 yards, if that, jerking it out of the holster and jerking the trigger. And,
not seeing a thing, I'm sure.
Not seeing a thing, like slapping the trigger, maybe hitting the shoulder of the silhouette and saying, yeah, I got it. That's good enough. That would take him down, right? And so I realized it wasn't until 2022 when I had taken like some NRA classes and some very basic classes with instructors that were okay, but not great. But I went to the Active Self-Protection Conference, and that's when everything really changed for me in realizing that if that's your only metric, you can be really good at that. Like if someone is right in front of you and you know you have to shoot them and one shot will do it, you can be really good at that and suck at everything else. And that's where I was. And, it took the big, strong hands of Adam Winch to say, you're standing wrong, you're holding this wrong, move over here, and so, I trained with some just incredible instructors then. And that's when everything changed for me and realizing like, oh, draw to first shot at 3 yards is not everything. It's not even that likely that you're going to need that. So again, I'm not saying that that's a bad skill to have, but it needs to be one of many. And I think the big problem when people start doing just draw to first shots is that you can get the gun out really quickly and your grip be terrible. And you have an awful stance and your posture is like super lean back. Your legs are too close together. You don't see the sights and you're just slapping the trigger. So that's all well and good when you're at 3 yards. But what happens when you have to hit an A zone at 5 yards or 7 yards or 10 yards? Then everything's out the window because you've done everything wrong, right? Or what if you're staying at 3 yards, but you need to get a second shot off really quickly? Well, if that first shot changed your posture, you didn't see your sights, and your grip was garbage from the beginning, then you can't really take a good second shot. And so I realized that like all of the fundamental things that I should have focused on in the beginning were actually what makes people intermediate and expert level shooters. It's not that they just have superhuman speed. It's that they take those fundamentals and they actually have really, really good grip, and they actually focus on the trigger pull, whether they're doing it slow or fast, they're doing it right. And their stance is consistent every single time. And they wait to see the sights or they wait to shoot until they see the sights, which crazy concept. You actually have to see what you're shooting at.
It's probably a good idea.
It probably is. Yeah. So I realized that not only a lot of the things that I was doing were fundamentally unsafe, because I was just trying to go really fast at the expense of form, right? Like it's kind of like working out. What happens when you have awful form, but you try to lift a ton of weight, or you try to, lift crazy amounts of reps? You end up hurting yourself. Like when you don't do it right, it's bad. It's dangerous. Yeah. And so it's the same way with a gun. Like you have to get your form down. And when you're a beginner, I don't care how slow you draw. I don't care how slow you pull the trigger. I don't care even how accurate you are in the very beginning. I care if you're doing the things right. And so if you have a perfect stance and you have the perfect grip and you have great sight picture and great trigger press, then you can start slowly picking up speed, and then you can actually hit things accurately, and you're not just throwing bullets at the berm and claiming that you're fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but for some people, it's just fun to go fast. I get that.
Yeah. Oh, totally I get that too. My problem was I thought I was fast until I got ready to do a bill drill, and I realized that I couldn't shoot fast at all. I could shoot one shot fast, and that was it. And so focusing on those fundamentals and taking one of Brian Hill's classes, I'll brag on him for a minute. I took his class and I did his deliberate coaching class, which is kind of his, what's the one that goes along with that?
The inner game of shooting?
Yeah, inner game of shooting.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a part of that class. And when I took that class, I realized all of those fundamentals that I really needed to hone in on. And my bill drill went from a 410 to a 229 just like in a weekend. Yeah. And that wasn't like I didn't gain some crazy speed. It was because I actually focused on the beginner level important things and did them really well. And then all of a sudden the speed was there.
Yeah. Yep. I totally agree. It's so crazy that Brian can find those things in people, which, by the way, he's going to be in Montana in July 2025.
Oh, is he really?
Inner game of shooting. Yeah. So if anyone watching wants to train with Brian Hill in Montana, I'll be announcing that officially probably in like February next year. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, Brian Hill's a good one. There are a lot of good trainers out there that understand that I don't know how the right way to say it, but in essence, mastering the fundamentals is essentially like what an advanced shooter is.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no such thing as advanced shooting. It's just the fundamentals mastered. And that's what we all are trying to do, is master the fundamentals. And
exactly.
It's no different if you are lifting weights, if you are if you're shooting a gun, or any other skill set that you're trying to master. It's all fundamentals. So that's really important and helpful. We unpacked quite a bit here today.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
For sure.
And I took notes. And now I don't remember what was for what. I still can't read that bottom one. I don't know what I wrote. That's okay.
That's probably the best question too.
It probably was. I know. Well, I don't ever want to interrupt people when they're talking. And so I take notes so that I can go back to it. But it's often happens that by the time the person gets done talking, it's not on the same subject anymore.
Exactly.
So that's okay though. So how can people learn more about you? I've got your website, workmanprotection.com here for people to check out. On YouTube, it's Workman Protection as well. Is that right?
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And email is workmanprotectiontraining@gmail.com. I post weekly long form videos on YouTube. So I'm there every single week posting videos specifically for concealed carry beginners. So anybody that's really getting into whether it be shooting or gear to buy or mindset to have, that's what I do. I really want to answer the questions that I had when I was a beginner level so that you don't have to spend years and years of doing draw to first shot and have no idea what you're doing like I did. I want you to be able to have the skills, tools, and mindset to protect yourself and your family as a protector. That's where I am every week. And then I also do YouTube shorts off of those, mostly little clips from the long form videos. So I post a lot of content on YouTube. And then anybody that's either an instructor or just in the firearms world that's interested in starting a YouTube channel or growing a YouTube channel or making money on YouTube, definitely shoot me an email and I'll send you some information on our mastermind. It's really a unique community in that, like, I've just been able to, I'm almost in shock when I tell people about it, that the people that I'm able to name drop that are a part of the mastermind and that have spoken on the mastermind and are going to come speak on the mastermind, just because I'm flattered that they even want to be a part of this. Because for me, it's such an encouraging community and we're able to really bounce ideas off of each other and grow together. So anybody that's interested in the YouTube world of or in the firearms world of YouTube and growing a channel, definitely send me an email. We'd love to have you.
Workman Protection Training at gmail.com. Go to Workman Protection on YouTube and check out his videos. And I got to say, guys, Will's videos are incredibly well done. They are professional quality videos. I know you're teaching about this stuff on your mastermind, but you're not one of those. Remember when you're talking about the instructors that maybe don't learn from those guys?
Yeah, that was
you're
my
not
goal.
In that category.
Yeah, my goal was, I know a lot of people in the firearms world that are actually teaching really good stuff on YouTube, but they're making 20-minute long videos of them at the range with no cuts, no graphics. It looks filmed on an iPhone from 15 years ago, like just terrible quality. You can't hear them talk, like everything's muffled. And I didn't want that. Like, those are the videos that I had to watch a lot of to gain any information. And I was like, I want to get in, give people what they came for in a really good quality environment and give them a really good quality video to get that information. And it's opened a lot of really cool doors. I had a video 2 weeks ago that I did where I went and toured a holster factory that's one of my sponsors, Eclipse Holsters, and was able to go in their factory and see how these holsters were made and their assembly line and their machinery and all this stuff. It was just awesome. And I told them, like, when I got ready to leave, I was like, I feel like I should be paying you guys to be able to be here and like have this personal tour and see all this. I mean, I got to make my own holster. Like, it was awesome.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So it's just opened like so many cool doors, and I've been able to connect with so many cool people along the way.
Well, your mastermind really, I mean, I'm not just blowing smoke, Will. Your mastermind is really about you just serving up tons of value to others that are we're all trying to move forward in educating people and helping people not make the same mistakes we did. We're not talking down to you and saying, oh, why didn't you think of that? Because, we were in that same boat too. And just trying to navigate what is good information and what's not, especially in the world we live in now. It's so incredibly difficult to do. And so I appreciate that you're one of those trusted people that I recommend. And I hope that you guys check out Workman Production on YouTube. Will's a great guy, big heart. Love you, Will. I love everything you're doing. And I wish all the best for you in the future.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I am honored to be able to be here talking to you. I love it.